My name is Ethan Rivers, a 20-year-old drama student at St. Helena College, a place where ambition, ego, and dreams clash under the hot lights of the campus theater. I was just another face in the crowd, quiet, unremarkable, more comfortable handling stage lights than standing beneath them. Acting had always fascinated me, but my confidence? Non-existent. That was until Professor Lillian Hart, our charismatic, demanding theater instructor, decided to change everything. Lillian wasn't the kind of teacher you could easily impress. She'd been a Broadway actress once, and she carried that aura, sharp eyes, elegant posture, a voice that could slice through silence like a blade. She believed in perfection, and she had no tolerance for mediocrity. Her classes were notorious for breaking egos and building stars. I joined her advanced acting workshop mostly because Isabella, my girlfriend, convinced me to. "You need this," she'd said, twirling her dark hair as we sat in the campus cafe. "You're always hiding behind the curtains. Maybe it's time people saw what you can do." I had smiled weakly. "I'm fine backstage. You know I hate being in front of people." But Isabella knew how to push me.
She always did.
She wasn't cruel, just confident, the kind of girl who filled a room with laughter. We'd been together since high school, but lately, she'd been distant. She had dreams bigger than mine, ambitions that left me chasing her shadow. So when she teased, "What's the worst that could happen? You forget your lines?" I signed up the next day, partly to impress her, partly to prove to myself I wasn't just a background character in my own life. The first week of rehearsals went horribly. My voice trembled, my posture wilted, and every time Professor Hart looked at me, I felt like a fraud. Then came the day that changed everything. She stood before the class, her arms crossed, her gaze piercing. "We have a problem," she announced. "Our female lead for the upcoming play The Masquerade of Hearts has transferred. Without her, there's no production." A murmur swept through the room. The play was our department's big performance of the year, the one that decided scholarships and internships. Hart sighed. "We need a stand-in. Someone who can handle the part until we find a replacement." Her eyes scanned the room, landing inexplicably on me.
"Ethan."
I blinked.
"Me?"
"You know the lines. You've been filling in during table reads." "Yes, but that's just, I was reading them as a placeholder." She tilted her head. "You have emotion, Ethan. You just don't know how to use it. Sometimes stepping outside yourself is the best way to discover who you are." The class chuckled. Someone whispered, "Guess he's the new Juliet." My face burned. "Professor, I." But Hart wasn't asking. "You'll fill in as Celeste for rehearsal. Costume fitting is tomorrow." The room erupted in whispers. My pulse pounded. Celeste, the graceful, tragic heroine, was the opposite of me in every possible way. Elegant, confident, alluring. That night, I couldn't focus on anything. Isabella called me while I was pacing my dorm room. "What's wrong?" she asked. I hesitated, embarrassed to say it out loud. "Professor Hart wants me to play the female lead. Just for rehearsal." There was a pause, then a laugh. "You? As a girl?"
"Yeah."
"Stupid, right?" She laughed again, softer this time. "Actually, that could be kind of fun. You've got nice eyes, Ethan. You'd make a cute Celeste." "Stop it." I felt my cheeks warm, though I couldn't help smiling. "I'm serious."
"Try it."
"You're always afraid of what people think. Maybe this will help." Maybe she was right. Maybe it was just an exercise, a way to break out of my shell. But deep down, something else stirred, a strange, nervous curiosity I didn't want to admit. The next afternoon, I stepped into the costume room. It smelled faintly of old velvet and hairspray. Racks of dresses lined the walls, shimmering fabrics, feathered masks, corsets, and gowns that looked like they belonged in another century. Professor Hart was already there with her assistant, Miss Clark. Ethan," Hart said, her eyes glinting with amusement. "Ready to become Celeste?" I forced a laugh. "As ready as I'll ever be."
"Good."
"We'll start simple. Miss Clark, the blue gown, please." My stomach dropped when she handed me a long satin dress. In the fitting room, Hart instructed. And don't worry, it's just fabric. Confidence makes the costume come alive. Inside the small fitting space, I stared at the gown in my hands. The silky material felt foreign against my skin. I hesitated, then exhaled and began changing. When I finally stepped out, the room went quiet. Hart studied me for a long moment. Interesting, she said finally. Not bad at all. The face structure helps. Ms. Clark smiled kindly. Once we add the wig and makeup, he'll look the part. My reflection in the mirror startled me. A boy in a blue gown, awkward and uncertain. The fabric clung to me in strange ways, reshaping my silhouette. My hands trembled slightly, yet my heart beat faster with something that wasn't just embarrassment. Now, Hart said, stepping closer, let's see if you can become her. I nodded slowly. Somewhere between shame and curiosity, a spark ignited. Maybe this was my chance, not just to act, but to transform. When I returned to my dorm that evening, Isabella texted me. Isabella, so, how did it go, Celeste? Me? Weird. Embarrassing. But kinda interesting. Isabella, send a pic. Me? No way. Isabella, fine. But I'm coming to your next rehearsal. I froze at her message. That was the moment I realized whatever had started as a harmless experiment was about to become something much more complicated. Because if Isabella saw me as Celeste, would she still see me as Ethan? The next few days blurred together like a fever dream. Rehearsals grew longer, Professor Hart's expectations sharper. She made me practice every line, every gesture, every glance, until Celeste wasn't just a character I played, but someone who slowly began to take root inside me. At first, I treated it like an act. But the more time I spent in that blue gown under those stage lights, the less I recognized the reflection staring back. It happened one late afternoon, when Hart announced that we'd be running a full costume rehearsal. Makeup, hair, everything, she said. We're simulating opening night conditions. No excuses. Ms. Clark handed me a tray of makeup products, brushes, and a blonde wig styled into elegant curls. I laughed nervously. You really expect me to do all this? Clark smiled. You'll be surprised how natural it feels once you stop fighting it. I sat at the vanity, staring at the unfamiliar items. Slowly, almost hesitantly, I began applying the foundation the way Clark demonstrated. Light, smooth, hiding the edges of my jaw. Then came eyeliner, mascara, lipstick. Each stroke blurred the line between who I was and who I was pretending to be. When Clark placed the wig on my head and adjusted it, I barely recognized the person in the mirror. Celeste stared back, soft features, sparkling eyes, a fragile grace that didn't belong to Ethan Rivers. And for the first time, I didn't feel ridiculous. I felt powerful. Good, Hart said from behind me, startling me. You're beginning to understand. Celeste isn't about imitation. She's about surrender. Let go of Ethan. Become her. Her words lingered as we began the scene. My heels clicked against the wooden floor. My voice, now higher, trembling but smooth, filled the air. And when the scene ended, the applause, even from the skeptical classmates, hit me like electricity. For a moment, I was seen. 2 days later, Isabella showed up. She entered the rehearsal hall mid-scene, leaning against the doorframe with a smirk. When rehearsal ended, she walked over, clapping slowly.
Wow.
You actually look incredible. I tried to laugh it off. Don't start. No, I mean it, she said, circling me. I barely recognized you. Her voice carried amusement, but her eyes, those sharp, observant eyes, held something else. Curiosity?
Confusion?
Maybe even jealousy. I didn't think you'd actually do it, she admitted. But you kind of pull it off. Her words made me blush, though I quickly turned away. It's just acting. She crossed her arms. Is it? That question hung in the air. After rehearsal, we walked together back to my dorm. The silence between us felt heavy, charged. When we reached my door, she leaned close. You know, Celeste suits you in a weird way. Confident, graceful, Not like the Ethan who hides from everything. I'm not hiding. She smirked. Aren't you? Then she kissed me. Soft, teasing before whispering, maybe your teacher knows what she's doing. And just like that, she was gone, leaving me with a heart pounding so hard it hurt. Days turned into weeks. Rehearsals stretched late into the night. I began spending more time as Celeste than as Ethan. At first, it was just for class. But then Hart started inviting me to her office after rehearsals to fine-tune performances. She'd correct the smallest gestures, how Celeste should move her hand, tilt her head, breathe between lines. You have potential, she told me once, her eyes gleaming. But you hold back. Stop pretending this isn't part of you.
Her words haunted me.
I found myself practicing even alone, adjusting wigs, experimenting with makeup, mimicking Celeste's grace in the mirror of my dorm bathroom. Each time I wiped off the makeup, I felt empty, like I'd erased someone more authentic than the man underneath.
And that scared me.
Because what started as a role was turning into something deeper, something I didn't understand. One Friday night, after rehearsal, I was still in costume when Isabella showed up unannounced at my dorm. Ethan, open up, she called, knocking on the door. Panic surged through me. I looked down, still wearing Celeste's gown, wig, makeup, everything. I grabbed my robe, threw it over the dress, and opened the door halfway. Hey, what are you doing here? She frowned. You weren't answering. I thought maybe. Her eyes drifted to the side. Something shimmered on the table, the blonde wig I'd forgotten to hide. What's that? I froze. Nothing, I said quickly. She stepped inside before I could stop her. The room smelled faintly of perfume and foundation powder. Her gaze swept over the vanity table, lipstick tubes, brushes, the half-empty bottle of nail polish. Wow, she murmured. You've really been practicing, huh? I opened my mouth to explain, but she turned toward me with a strange look, half amusement, half something unreadable. I didn't know you were taking it this seriously, she said softly. Do you like it? My throat tightened. It's part of the role. That's all. Sure. She smiled faintly, but her tone had changed. I guess I'll see you tomorrow then, Celeste. When she left, I sank onto the bed, trembling. Something about the way she'd said that name, half teasing, half uncertain, made my stomach twist. Was she starting to suspect that this wasn't just acting anymore? The more I lived as Celeste, the more I began to lose track of Ethan. In class, people treated me differently. Compliments replaced laughter. Admiration replaced mockery.
But it wasn't me they saw.
It was her. One night, while scrubbing off the heavy makeup after another exhausting rehearsal, I stared at my reflection, half-faded lipstick, smudged eyeliner, tired eyes, and whispered, "Who am I right now?" No answer. Just the quiet hum of the dorm lights. The mirror didn't lie. Celeste was the confident one. Ethan was the shadow. And somewhere deep inside, I feared I preferred it that way. The night before the preview performance, Professor Hart called me into her office. You've done well, she said. But tomorrow, I need you to go beyond the act. What do you mean? Celeste has a scene where she confesses her true self. It's raw, vulnerable. I want you to feel that. I hesitated. You mean lose control? She smiled slightly.
Exactly.
For once, stop separating Ethan from Celeste. Let them merge. I left her office shaken. What did she mean by merge? But later that night, as I stood before the mirror again, wearing the familiar gown, her words echoed. Let them merge. I adjusted the wig, brushed the soft curls back, and for a moment, I didn't see a disguise. I saw possibility. Celeste smiled back at me, confident, calm, alive. And that's when Isabella called. I'm sitting front row tomorrow, she said cheerfully. You better make me proud. I wanted to tell her everything. How confused I felt, how blurred the lines had become, but I didn't. Because part of me didn't want her to know the truth. Not yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of stage lights, Hart's knowing smile, Isabella's curious gaze. I'd started this as a joke, a temporary role. Now it felt like a confession. Tomorrow, I would step onto that stage not as Ethan pretending to be Celeste, but as someone trapped between them. The question was, which one would walk off the stage when it was over? The day of the performance arrived like a storm I couldn't escape. Backstage, the air was thick with perfume, hairspray, and anxiety. The flickering stage lights cast long shadows across the dressing room, and I could hear the murmur of the audience beyond the curtains. My hands shook as I adjusted Celeste's gown, the silk soft but constricting in all the wrong ways. Miss Clark approached, holding a small mirror.
Relax.
You've done this 100 times in rehearsal. Just remember, Celeste is confident. Ethan can step aside for a few hours. I nodded, but my mind refused to obey. Ethan was still there, a boy on the edge of exposure, standing in a woman's body and wig, teetering between two identities. As the curtains rose, I stepped onto the stage. The audience's applause washed over me, deafening and exhilarating. I heard Isabella's cheer somewhere in the front row, and my heart caught in my throat. For the first scene, I moved exactly as rehearsed, fluid, elegant, Celeste in every sense. But then, Hart's voice echoed in my memory. Let them merge. The audience's faces blurred as I allowed myself to feel everything. The thrill of being seen, the fear of being caught, the dizzying freedom of being Celeste. My voice rose higher than rehearsals, softer and more melodic, trembling with raw emotion. Then, mid-monologue, the unexpected happened. A gust of air from a backstage fan caught the edge of my wig. One curl slipped loose, brushing against my cheek. Panic surged. The audience wouldn't know, but I did. My secret could be exposed at any moment. I reached up, trying to adjust it gracefully, but my hand trembled. Hart's words echoed in my mind. Feel her, not Ethan. I froze for a split second, and then, instead of retreating, I incorporated it into the scene. I ran a delicate hand through my hair, tilting my head just so. The audience gasped softly at the subtle gesture. Somewhere in the crowd, Isabella gasped too. Relief mixed with adrenaline and a thrill I couldn't name coursed through me. I realized mistakes could become art. Vulnerability could become power. Halfway through the second act, a commotion backstage froze me in place. Who's there? I whispered, trying to stay in character. Before I could react, the curtain to the wings rustled violently. And there she was, Isabella, standing in full sight, face pale and eyes wide. I choked, forgetting my lines. She had seen the wig, the makeup, the full transformation. Every secret I'd tried to guard, exposed. The audience hadn't noticed yet, but I could barely breathe. My legs felt like jelly, my hands slick with sweat. You, I stammered. She held up a finger, smiling nervously. Don't stop. Please, just finish. I want to see the whole thing. Her words shattered my panic and replaced it with something I couldn't describe. Permission, acceptance, and a deeper fear that she might love Celeste more than Ethan. I swallowed hard, letting Celeste fully take over. Every movement became deliberate. The sway of the dress, the delicate gestures, the tremble of a voice that conveyed heartbreak, longing, and defiance all at once. The audience leaned in. Every gasp, every rustle of seats, pushed me further into the character. Ethan melted away. Only Celeste remained. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I wasn't just acting. I was discovering a part of myself that had been buried under years of fear and self-doubt. Hart, watching from the wings, nodded subtly. Merge, her look said. Just as I approached the climactic confession scene, where Celeste was supposed to reveal her deepest secret to the audience, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned slightly, and there was David, a classmate notorious for gossiping, his eyes widening in recognition. Ethan, he whispered harshly. My heart froze. Could he ruin everything? Could he shout out my secret mid-performance? But instead, David's expression softened. You're incredible. Keep going. Shock and relief collided in me. I nodded, almost stumbling, and faced the audience again. The danger hadn't passed, but somehow, knowing someone new and approved made it possible to step fully into Celeste. In the final scene, Celeste is supposed to drop her mask in front of the audience, a literal unmasking of vulnerability. I lifted the ornate Venetian mask, my hand trembling, and paused. The audience leaned forward. Isabella held her breath in the front row. For a heartbeat, I considered dropping it and revealing Ethan instead.
But no, not now.
I let the mask slip from my fingers. It landed softly on the floor. Celeste, the confident, graceful, radiant version of me, was fully visible. My chest swelled with pride and terror simultaneously. And then, just as I bowed, my heel caught on the edge of the stage. Time slowed. I stumbled forward, my body tipping toward the front row, and Isabella's hand shot out. She grabbed my wrist, steadying me. Her eyes locked with mine, wide with awe and concern. The audience erupted in applause, oblivious to the near disaster. Backstage, the adrenaline crashed into exhaustion. I collapsed into a chair, shaking, still in full costume. Isabella knelt beside me, brushing a loose curl from my face. "You were amazing," she said softly. "Not Ethan. Celeste. You owned her." I don't know who I am anymore," I admitted, voice breaking. She smiled gently. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe you're both. Maybe you're more than you ever realized." Her words echoed heart's guidance. Merge. For the first time, I didn't feel ashamed. I didn't feel like a fraud. I felt alive. As we walked out of the theater together, the applause still ringing in my ears, I didn't notice the shadows shifting backstage. Professor Hart's eyes met mine, a subtle smirk playing on her lips. Something in her gaze told me the challenge wasn't over. That the next test, more intense, more personal, was already waiting. And then my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're good, but the real test is just beginning." My stomach dropped. Isabella squeezed my hand, unaware of the message. "Ready for a celebration?" she asked. I nodded, forcing a smile, but my mind raced.
Someone knew.
Someone was watching. And whatever came next, I wasn't sure I could handle it as just Ethan or just Celeste. The celebration in the theater lobby was a blur of congratulatory hugs, champagne flutes, and flashing cameras. My classmates patted me on the back, praising Celeste's performance, oblivious to the dual life I was juggling. I stood near the refreshments, still in costume, my wig slightly askew, my heart pounding in a rhythm I couldn't control. Isabella laughed with a group of friends, radiant and alive, but I couldn't shake the gnawing tension at the base of my spine. The unknown text from earlier burned in my pocket like a ticking time bomb. "You're good, but the real test is just beginning." Who could it be? A classmate? Hart? Someone from the audience? My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. I tried to shake it off and joined Isabella. She wrapped an arm around my waist, her eyes sparkling with pride. "You were incredible tonight," she whispered, leaning close. "I never imagined you could pull that off. Not just the role, the way you became her." I forced a laugh. "Thanks. I guess all those rehearsals finally paid off." Her gaze lingered, searching my face. "Do you like being Celeste?" I froze. My heart thundered in my chest. How could I answer that? If I said yes, would she understand? Would she think I was strange? "I don't know," I admitted finally. "It's complicated." She smiled softly, brushing a stray curl from my face. "It's okay. I like complicated." Her words were a balm, but the dread in my pocket reminded me that my secret wasn't entirely safe. As we mingled, a tall figure slipped through the crowd. Someone familiar, yet I couldn't place them at first. Their eyes locked onto me with an intensity that made my stomach churn. Before I could react, the person disappeared behind a cluster of students, leaving only a folded note on a nearby table. I picked it up with trembling hands. "Celeste is impressive, but can Ethan survive the scrutiny? Meet me tomorrow, 6 p.m. Be ready." The handwriting was unfamiliar, precise, and cold. I glanced around. No one was watching. My pulse spiked. I tucked the note into my pocket, hoping Isabella wouldn't notice. "You're Awfully quiet, she said, sensing my distraction. Just tired, I muttered, forcing a smile. She studied me, suspicion flickering in her eyes. You're hiding something. I shook my head, laughing nervously. Nothing. Just the thrill of the show, I guess. She didn't press further. But I knew she would notice if things escalated. And deep down, I feared what would happen if the next test, whoever sent the note, revealed Ethan's secret to the world. Later that night, alone in my dorm, I removed the gown and wig, trying to return to Ethan. I stared at my reflection, tired eyes, messy hair, a face that had felt overshadowed by Celeste for weeks. I touched my cheek, tracing the line where makeup had once highlighted cheekbones that weren't mine. For a fleeting moment, I missed her, Celeste's confidence, her grace. The way people had looked at her, at me, with admiration instead of dismissal. And then I realized something terrifying. I wasn't sure if I could ever go back to being just Ethan. The dual life wasn't temporary anymore. Celeste had left a mark on my identity, and perhaps on Isabella's perception of me as well. Sleep wouldn't come. I kept replaying the text in my mind. The real test is just beginning. Who was watching? What did they want? Why target me now, just when I had finally felt seen? The possibilities twisted my stomach into knots. Was it a friend testing my loyalty to Ethan? Or a stranger who had recognized my transformation and intended to expose me? I paced my dorm, heart hammering, every shadow suddenly threatening. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in. I realized I was no longer just preparing for a performance. I was preparing for a revelation, a confrontation, a reckoning I couldn't yet predict. Just as I sank onto the bed, trying to calm my racing thoughts, Isabella's voice came through the door.
Ethan?
Are you awake? I froze. Did she hear the note fall when I picked it up? Did she know about the stranger waiting tomorrow? I'm here, I called, my voice tighter than I intended. The door creaked open, and she stepped inside, concern etched across her face. You're scaring me. What's going on? I swallowed hard. Could I tell her? Could I admit that my secret, my life as Celeste, was about to collide with a danger I couldn't control? I shook my head. Nothing. Just thinking. She didn't argue, but her eyes lingered. You're hiding something, she said softly, almost a whisper. And I'm going to find out what it is. I forced a smile, but my heart sank. Isabella was curious, protective, and deeply observant. The next day, the truth might be impossible to hide. As she left, I sat in silence, staring at the ceiling. The stage lights, the applause, the thrill of Celeste. All of it felt like a dream I wasn't ready to wake from. The note burned in my pocket, a reminder that my secret was no longer safe. Whoever had sent it knew about Celeste, about my transformation. And tomorrow, they would demand something, or reveal everything. I curled into my blanket, mind racing, heart pounding. Would I survive the scrutiny? Would Isabella accept both sides of me, Ethan and Celeste? Or would everything I had worked for, everything I had become, unravel in a single moment? Sleep finally came, but it was restless, filled with visions of gowns, stage lights, and shadowy figures watching from the wings. The story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And as the first light of dawn crept into my room, one thing was certain. Tomorrow, everything would change.